All right, hello and welcome to a special bonus episode of the RPG Academy podcast. I am Michael. I am the host of the RPG Academy, as well as the lead organizer of AcadeCon 2019. Ours goes to 7. And joining me for this special bonus episode of the show is Tom. Tom, say hello to everyone.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing great. I just got done doing a long show
You
on here
did.
already.
Yes, I watched it. It was good stuff.
I thought so too. I'm very excited about it. Taylor's awesome dude. I love his insight that he brings to DMing. Obviously, he plays a lot of different games. I play a few different games. He plays a lot, and I love his insight. He's also a great guy. I wish Victoria, she wasn't able to join us. Unfortunately, I wish she had been there. But I'm still excited to get it officially on the show and be able to eventually get it on the audio only. But
Yes,
you were the lead organizer of AcadeConLine this year.
I
So I
was.
want to chat with you a little bit about that, how the process go. First time you saw the stress that I dealt with last year, successes and
Yeah,
failures, but I think the panels probably are the biggest success. You want to talk about those a little bit?
yeah. There's a definitely so it's like last year was the first year for doing a AcadeConLine, our online convention to kind of boost the AcadeCon IRL convention. Just kind of remind people, hey, that we're out here. Our big convention's coming up, and just play games with people who don't get to come to AcadeCon. So I decided to go ahead and take the reins of organizing this event this year. And we had games, not as many players as we wanted, which is a
Yeah.
learning. And I think there's a lot of room to grow. And I think we can figure out how to get people to play online games. But then we also decided to have panels, and we wanted to organize panels because at conventions there's usually panels, and there's nothing that is hosting a talk online. There's a relatively low barrier to entry for this,
Yeah.
even for the panelists, where everybody can just the comforts of their home, and we can just get on and chat about RPGs. So we decided to do that, and I had a great time doing it. I felt like they were uh, very successful. All the panelists were just great, super nice. I just can't thank them enough for coming on and just sharing their insight and their professional experience. So I'm excited to give our listeners that audio only content on the podcast feed, because we had some really good stuff.
Yeah. So I want to give a quick shout out to Shortman Ian 444. He's one of our patrons. He's been a friend of the show for a long time. He comes to CataCon every year. He's one of the most active people on our Discord. We just chat about stupid stuff, movies and comics, TV, that kind of stuff. But both of his D&D games that he's running filled up.
They
So
did.
out of all of the players that we got, like 90% of them were playing in his games, which might be telling that he's the only one that was running D&D 5e. Um,
This is true.
but I want to thank him personally for, well, I guess personally later when I tell him to his face. But now I just want to thank him on the show for agreeing to run those games, because clearly that's what most people were interested in, and we got the most excitement and response to his game. So thank you.
This is true. Also, we had a lot of other great Calvin Johns with the Fantasy RPG. His game ran this
Yeah.
afternoon.
The one game that I wanted in is that one, and I couldn't because I was doing my panel. But that's the one I was
It's
like, I'm going to jump in if I can.
it's I mean, and then the people like Craig Campbell was playing within that game
Oh,
too. So
awesome.
I know. So it was just it's just gonna. I'm sure it was a great game. And then also got a yeah, we just had some great. I know not everybody's game got to run just because we didn't have those players, but still, I can't thank you enough. Just you putting yourself out there and volunteering for that just means so much to myself, as you're trying to you know the pain, Michael. You're trying to organize something and you want other people to love it as much as you do, and so when people do buy into it, it's perfect.
Yep. It's one of those things like when it works well, it's so fulfilling, and when it doesn't, it's so frustrating, and it
Mhm.
goes back and forth between those two, like on the turn of a dime. You're like, this is oh my god, it's awful. Oh, it's so great again.
Yeah,
So it just kind of goes back and forth. So let's talk
that's
a little
right.
bit though about the panels. So let's just walk them. So the first one was hosted
Yes.
by Calum from the Release
It,
Podcast.
it was, and I'm pulling up my panel list right now so I can give you a better description of everything, and so Tom can remember all of his stuff. Okay. So yeah, the first panel was hosted by Calum of the Rollers Pod, who is absolutely super supportive of our show. Always willing to jump in there and He really is. He's super passionate about gaming. And so he went ahead and I asked him, like, hey, Caleb, would you mind hosting a panel? He said, sure, let's do one about RPGs over in the UK and Ireland, since that's kind of what his show is about. It's about kind of bridging the RPGs over here with what's going on in Europe, because they have a very active and a very different RPG scene and community than we have. And so he went out and reached out to some uh, RPG creators over there, and he talked to Becky Annison, Lynn Hardy, and then Kat Tobin, and then also Liz Gist, who was one of the creators of the Uncaged anthology. Unfortunately, she came down with some sort of sickness, and you know how that
Yep.
happens. Sometimes you're just not feeling it, so completely understand that. But yeah, I mean, Becky Annison, who's works with Pelgrane, and then Lynn Hardy, who's with Chaosium, and it was just absolutely just a really um, it was a really cool panel. They shared a lot of insight about the differences, and I highly recommend checking it out, because there's a lot of stuff that you don't realize as being somebody from over in the States about what's going on over there. I think one of the things that stuck out is they talked about guns, and like it or not, we have a very different gun culture over here than they do over there. And they talked about how games in the States, a lot of times their guns and violence are just more prevalent. And they didn't say that was necessarily wrong. It's just something that
It's
you
different.
won't, it's different. And so there's a lot of interesting insight
Yeah, it's one of
there.
those things because I was able to listen to most of that one. I ended up having to work Saturday, but I was literally the only one in the office, so I was listening while I was working. And there's not like a lot of how to be a better DM, like actionable advice, but it's very interesting and kind of thought provoking to hear the differences in the culture and some of the game design elements, and just some of the anecdotes about how they played. Uh, was it Vampire the Masquerade in actual castles over
Yeah.
there, because there's castles everywhere, and they play a lot more in like pubs and tea shops than maybe in the U.S. I know growing up, I grew up in the gamer shame, satanic panic thing. So we hid the fact that we played, and there it was a lot more always just sort of public space. I think Caleb said like the first time he ever played was on a sidewalk, like just outside of a shop somewhere. They were on sitting down playing D&D or whatever the game was by the road, and I was like, that's crazy, but that's just the way it is there. And I don't know, it's very interesting and thought provoking, if not actionable. How can I make things different or better at my table?
Yeah. There was it was also do need to correct something I said is Kat Tobin is with
Pelgrane Press.
Pelgrane, and then Becky Anderson is with Black Armada Games. Just make sure I get that out there.
Gotcha.
The no, so yeah, a lot of different things. The other interesting thing, what they talked about conventions over there. The conventions over in Europe are a lot different than the conventions over in the States, and they actually said that they actually in a lot of ways prefer what we're doing over here, because we do a lot more panels, a lot more workshopping, educational stuff. Whereas over there, they like to just game, which is more power to them. But
Yeah.
a convention over in the UK, for it's going to be just people gaming for hours upon hours.
Yeah,
So
they're talking about like a panel of there might be how to publish for a company or like how to break into the industry or something. Where like in the States we have panels like relationships in RPGs, or using RPGs for like therapeutic value. It's almost like these non-traditional ways that role-playing games can be used or can affect people, and that's nothing that they seem to touch on, at least general terms, at their conventions. Also, D&D and Pathfinder are not nearly as dominant. Like
yeah,
most of the large RPG conventions here, D&D and Pathfinder organized play are a large portion of the RPG space, and it's very little to non-existent in a lot of their conventions.
yeah. So I definitely recommend checking that one out. The next one was it was about world building with purpose. And this is one that I did with Federico Sons, who is the designer and creator of the Nibiru RPG, which I'm a huge fan of that. He's also assistant line editor with Modifius. And then also Quinn Wilson, who we all know from the Swallows of the South podcast, used to be part of the RPG
I mean,
Academy Network, RIP, and
R.I.P.
then but who is now currently the who does the Arms of Tides podcast. So I wanted to do a world building panel because we talk a lot about you hear a lot of talking about world building and what it is, and it's not necessarily just creating worlds. And I knew that both Quinn and Federico, they are both very super intelligent. Um, People, but then they also bring they always try to bring a sense of humanity to what they're working on. I just wanted to pick their brain about how can you make a world that's relatable. And they shared some really interesting insight and some things that I didn't necessarily you miss a lot of times. They both talked about this idea of making your world mundane. And at first you're like, okay, I'm creating this massive, very cool fantasy world, but it's going to be impossible for players to connect to it if there's not something there that grounds them. And so Federico he mentioned the idea of what does it matter if you just mention that somebody in your game is drinking a cup of coffee? And it struck me, I was like, I've never really played an RPG where or a fantasy RPG where somebody was just drinking a cup of coffee. And who's to say it can't exist in that world? But it's something that brings us from our world into this crazy world that we're trying to engage with. So they shared a lot of great tips as far as, especially from a designer perspective, not as much from the game master or player side, but is some if you're working on developing a RPG, they shared some really good nuggets of information of how they've approached these things.
Yeah, and that parallels much with writing as a craft. I'm a big fan of the book On Writing by Stephen King, and he talks a lot about his process. And I'm a fan of Stephen King. I know not everyone is, but I am. And he talks about how grounding the world in the normal world makes the strangeness seem more strange when it happens. If someone drives a Kia, goes to their job at a like a Pep Boy auto parts store and drinks Coca-Cola, that is like, okay, I'm in this real world. So then when the stuff starts happening, it seems more crazy. If everything in your world is crazy, then it's all equally crazy and nothing stands out. So yeah, when you're building a world, even if it's for a game, start with what it is and then add that difference. Like this is just like Forgotten Realms, except everyone has magic. Or it's Dark Sun. It's like Forgotten Realms, but it's a desert planet, and which isn't really Forgotten Realms. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
focus. It's this is normal. Here are the exceptions to that normalcy. That's what makes this world interesting and worth exploring. Otherwise, why not just play in an established world or the real world?
Yeah, and then the last thing that I really wanted to share that was really great that both Federico and Quinn talked about was how to safely bring in aspects of the real world that are not great things into your game world. And there it's absolutely we can do this, but we need to be sensitive about how we're doing it. And they talked about the certain safety measures that you can take in order to make your world feel more real without taking a culture that's not yours and respecting that. So it's some really good insight on that I was really glad that they were able to share. And then we jumped yesterday evening to a panel that I was really excited for, which was because it's one of the things that I'm super passionate about is teamwork at the table. It's basically playing characters that play nice with other people. All right. And that was with Richard Kurtz Landry, who we a friend of the show and one of the designers for Descent into Midnight.
He's also one of our top tier patrons and has been for a very long time.
Richard, man,
He's a good guy.
what a swell fellow.
And he comes to AcadeCon every year.
He does. And then Amelia Antrim, who is a part of the character creation cast and the Garbage of the Five Rings, who's been on several of the shows with us and was a special guest at AcadeCon this year. And I always love talking with Amelia and getting her insight. And then also Virginia Page, who is another assistant line editor with Modifius and is doing all sorts of stuff and actually has the Spy game is actually a game that she's helping to kickstart right now. And she is also one of the involved with the role play Haven over in the UK. So another person from over across the water joining us, and so it was great to have these all three of these people because they all share that same passion and about how to get everybody around the table making that collaborative story that we always talk about how RPGs is collaborative storytelling, and it's just such a buzzword. So we talked about how to actually do that, and about how that we're all sharing, and that's what it comes down to. It's all about sharing an experience, and then when if you're sitting there by yourself making your own experience, and then you get up and that's all you leave with, how much more you're missing out. So we talked about all sorts of things. So we talked about how to first make characters that work with in the framework of the game and work with the other characters. We talked about that one session that shall not be named. We talked about yeah, where then we also talked about how to share the spotlight. And then also one of my favorite topics as a player, how do you help the GM? Because Michael, we are doing so much heavy lifting and work that we don't want to do and that we don't necessarily have to do, and how the players have that agency and we just want them to take it. So it was a very good panel. I love that one. So
And then we just wrapped up my panel that I hosted on introduction to DMing or D&D. Taylor LaBreche from Riverhouse Games was my guest co-host. We were supposed to have Victoria Rogers from the Broadswords, but unfortunately came down with an illness this morning and wasn't able to make it. And this is the panel that I've ran at multiple conventions. I've done it at Gen Con a couple times, doing it again this year. Origins, we've ran it at AcadeCon a couple times. And it's basically introductory advice for someone who's never DM'd before but thinking about starting. So maybe they've been a player for a while, or they've come to D&D through one of the various podcasts or streams that are very popular, and they're like, that sounds like fun, I want to do that, but they have no actual idea how to start running the game. So it's it's aimed at people who are new or newer, but I do think there's some tips and tricks and techniques in there that could be valuable to anyone. There's certainly things that I do now that I didn't do for the first 27 years that I ran games that has made me a better DM. But I mean, we're not setting the world on fire and reframing the DM experience. We're just like, here's how you do a couple things. This might help make things a little easier. This might make the game a little bit more fun for both you and the players. So I really like it. I think it's solid. It's things I wish I knew 27 years ago. Would have made me a much better DM much earlier. But it's all opinions, as I like to say. So just because we say you should do it doesn't mean you should actually do it. It just means that this is what we've done that's worked for us. So maybe consider it.
Highly suggest it. No,
Yes.
no. So yeah, it was great listening to that because I hear about this panel a lot, but I've never actually heard it. So it's so true. I mean, I've only been running games since D&D 5e came out. All right, so relatively new on the block compared to someone like you or somebody who's been running games for a lot longer. But that doesn't necessarily mean though that you're not learning the same things that I am at this very moment. And which was you called it DMing 101, and there was a lot of great advice that is great for new DMs, but it was also just good to hear that again and some basics that just will always work. And then also some interesting stuff that I never thought about, like Taylor said, watch wrestling and then use that to help you make better combats. And my mind was just blown because it's so true. It's combat with story. And so no, it was really cool to watch that.
Yeah, it's good times. I'm excited to get that out on the actual feed fairly soon. It'll be on, all of these panels will be on our YouTube channel at some point in the fairly near future. We don't have an exact date yet. We want to go in, do a little bit of editing to cut out some of the dead spots and that kind of thing. And then there will be audio only versions on our regular podcast feed. Again, a little bit later from that, because I'm going to go through and actually do some editing to the audio, because it's weird. Like I do a sound test before we start recording these, and we always sound like we're talking about the same level. But when I listen to the audio back, there's wild disparity between sometimes on the audio. So then I have to go in and make some editing to make it sound better audio only. But near future, we'll have all these out in all the various ways.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, AcadeConLine, there's a few little things that definitely learn. Time zones were a killer, not just from having panelists, but the way that tabletop events works. And we're using it for AcadeCon, and AcadeCon will be fine because AcadeCon takes place in Dayton, Ohio, which is one time zone. We were running events in various time zones, and tabletop events doesn't specify which time zone it is.
Ooh.
Because so if there was any confusion on anything, that was it. It was wild. It was pretty much every question that I got from a player or GM had to do with time zones. So if you're listening to this and feel bad because you messed up a time zone and had to really quickly regroup, don't worry about it because you were not the only one.
Oh, that actually happened last year at AcadeCon. One of our special guests was from a different time zone, and when I had sent them their schedule, like, hey, here's what you're doing, they naturally put it in their own time zone, and they were late to their first event. And we're like, I called like, hey, I'm sorry, but where are you? Obviously, the rest of them were fine, but yeah, they just naturally fell into, this says 1 o'clock. That clearly means 1 o'clock Pacific time. No, it did not.
Yeah, so I mean, so that's definitely, so some of the games, like we had games running in Pacific time, Central time, Eastern time, and we specified it in the description, which was, hey, these games are going to be Eastern time, but because there's nothing built into tabletop events, especially the structure of where you go to sign up, and I can't set a time zone, it's just 3 p.m. and I'm just like, these games aren't Eastern time. We have to have a frame of reference, and so, yep.
Yeah, definitely good to know. So beyond that, I always like to ask anybody that I'm working with, but more like with my job, in this case, lessons learned. Is there anything that you clearly know next year we will do differently? Is there anything that we will not do next year that we did this year, or anything that we will definitely repeat next year because it worked this year?
So I think the biggest thing as far as lessons learned, and I'm not sure how we're going to do this just yet, but definitely want to keep on doing a AcadeConLine, but come up with ways to structure the games in a more uniform fashion. Instead of, we had all the games, use whatever Discord, Roll20, Google Hangouts, whatever you wanted to use. And it wasn't necessarily bad because we put that in, we allowed the GMs to kind of come up with that on their own and what worked for them. But there was still this cloud of mystery to the people signing up for the games, which I think may have been a contributing factor for why we didn't have a whole lot of players. And so just trying to remove a lot of mystery for how to do an online game, because especially I think there's a lot of people who are part of our audience who don't necessarily, we just created a barrier of entry. And so just trying to figure out a way to take that down, whether it's in coming up with some tutorials instead of just sending people emails, have these things ready to go. Like, this is how you run an online game. Give more resources. So that was the big thing. The thing that really helped me was I made sure I gave planning this event enough time. So that was huge. At first, I was getting really stressed out about it, and it was still like 4 months away. But that was, so definitely, I think continuing to just make sure I've got plenty of time to get panelists, make sure I have plenty of time to get GMs, and then just coming up with ways to decrease the barrier of entry and make it more user friendly for players.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that's, again, valuable information.
Mm-hmm.
We will take a look next year. I think one of the things we need to look at too is the weekend that we picked. We had a lot of contributing factors with vacations and everything. We didn't have the full spectrum of weekends to choose from. But yeah. I think someone mentioned there were a couple other events that kind of overlapped hours that might also have been a factor. So just something we can look at for next year.
Just establishing. But I think the biggest lesson learned is coming up. AcadeCon is coming real soon.
4 months, just under.
Yeah, we're using tabletop events to using its sign up system, and I think it's going to work great. And I think I was able to go through a lot of the pain points with AcadeConLine, so I think this is going to go relatively smooth for AcadeCon. So Michael, I'll definitely need to get you my feedback and what we need to do and what we don't need to do with tabletop events.
Okay, because I'm already working on that, so definitely we need to go with it soon because I may already be making mistakes that you can correct.
Yep.
But for what it seems like, what it's doing, it's doing well.
It really is. It's a powerful tool. You just, like anything, you just got to use it right.
Yeah. And then speaking of that, again, we want to talk a little bit about AcadeCon itself. So so at this point, it's just under 4 months away. It's November 8th, 9th, and 10th. Again, it's the Dayton Convention Center in Dayton, Ohio. It is an international destination. We have people flying from out of country to come play games with us in November, and we would love for more people to show up. We ran the Kickstarter back earlier in the year. All of those people were issued badges through tabletop events because there's like an admin function to do that. You can go now and buy your own badge currently, and it'll obviously, when you buy a badge, it'll do it for you. Registration is going to open around October, usually early October. The VIPs get a week or so to register first. That's one of the benefits of being a VIP. And then probably mid to late mid-October, like 15th to the 20th, is when general registration will open and everyone else will be able to go in and register. There are no per game fees, so once you have a badge, you can register for anything, but it will be first come, first serve, through the system. But for the most part, we don't have a whole lot of issue with that because if anything, we have the same problem with the AcadeCon we have with AcadeConLine. We often have more games than we have players, so there's a lot of variety and a lot of choice. There are a few special games that fill up really quick, some of the stuff the VIPs go for, but for the most part, you're going to have a good chance of getting some of the events that you want. We also have the open game library that's free to use. Any of the games that we have, you can just check out with an ID, play as long as you want, return when you're done. Panels, we have some workshops. We have a painting workshop this year. I got in contact with a local guy who does painting, and I set him up with a free vendor booth, and he's going to be doing painting workshops where you can paint a mini and take it with you. And
that's awesome.
Teaching, which I think is going to be really, really cool. We got our Artemis Space Bridge simulator will be there again this year. So if you wanted to pretend to be Star Trek in a non-IP violating way, you can do it.
That is it. All right. So Artemis is amazing. It really is. And it's so funny watching it be played at a AcadeCon because everybody who's at a AcadeCon they're all role players and they all turn it into a role play. It's almost like a LARP watching these people do the Artemis. And so I know I have a lot of fun with our gaming group. It's one of our highlights.
Yeah, it's a good time. And again, one of the things that, again, at AcadeCon, we don't charge for that. In a lot of places, when you play Artemis, it's a fee. It's not at ours. They do accept donations. So if you want to throw them a couple bucks, they have a jar out. But for the most part, everything at AcadeCon is free once you're inside. There are a few exceptions. Last year, we had a workshop where you made a little dragon. And if you wanted to buy the die that goes with it, you had to buy, it's like $2. But 99% of the stuff you do at AcadeCon is free once you have your badge. And then probably the biggest new thing I'll just mention quickly is I've been in contact with some of the local game stores. I haven't got to all of them yet, but a lot of them I've talked to, they are going to start selling badges for us. So you can buy a badge at a game store and they get to keep part of the profit. That's the benefit for them. So you can support that store and still buy a ticket with us through the various local game stores. So haven't talked to everybody, hoping to get more on board. I'm hoping that will help drive more people to know about it. If the game stores, I can't help but think that's where a lot of the gamers congregate.
Yeah.
If they're saying, hey, have you heard about AcadeCon? You can buy your badge, buy it right here, right now, might help out a little bit. So I'm pretty excited to get more stores on board with that. I think it's going to help drive traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the interesting things about AcadeCon is we have a lot of people who travel from a lot of different states to come to AcadeCon, and we don't necessarily have as much of a local influence within Cincinnati and Dayton. So it's very weird. So I think once we get that people from Cincinnati and Dayton actually participating in AcadeCon, I think it'll just get that much better. So I think it's really cool to really engage with our local community. So I'm really happy we're doing that this year.
Yep, I'm pretty excited about that. And then we do have a few events. Some of our special guests, we're talking with them right now, trying to get everybody to make sure they're set up and get the events in the system. But there's a few that are already in there. So if you go right now, you can look to see what's scheduled. Like everything that's submitted is already approved. So you can go right now without a badge and you can look to see what's being offered when. So if you think about getting a ticket but you're not sure, it's probably less than 30% filled, but there are some of the special event things in there. More to come. Faculty, so those part of the podcast, I'm going to start getting on all of us to get our events submitted here pretty quick. I'd like by the end of August to have all of the faculty events in there and all the special guest events, and then we'll start working on September to October getting all the others so that people are ready to register when it comes October. But for myself, I am probably going to run the Dragon Spine, which is that D&D 5e game I run every time at every convention. It's for people who've never played before. I've gotten a lot of amazing feedback. People seem to like it. I think it's fun to run, so I'll probably do that. We are probably going to do a live show, maybe a live detention. That we didn't do that last year, but I've had a couple people request, so I think we might do that.
That would be fun. It really would. We do some goofy stuff
Yeah.
on detention that I think would play well to a live
And
audience.
we could interact with them and have them choose like the where have your fingers been and the 10 things, get audience interaction as well. I'm going to rerun in a Dread game. Currently, I'm working on a like a Batman 66 game that would have two tables, a table of heroes and a table of villains. If it's ready, that's what I want to run. If not, I will default back to Scooby-Doo Dread because that's in my back pocket. I can run it by memory and people love it. Uh, but I don't have enough time to do both, so it's going to be one or the other. And I think that I want to run a session of Action 12 Cinema, which is the game that I say I'm developing it, but I don't do a lot of work on it. But it's a game that's supposed to emulate like B movies, so like not Indiana Jones, but Alan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold type stuff.
Oh, wow.
So it's a action B movie simulator. It's also GMless, so it's up to 4 players. Everybody takes turn being the GM kind of thing. So I've got a basic rule set down. It uses D12s because D12s are the best die. It just uses D12s. The whole reason I made it was to make people use D12s.
I agree.
But it's awesome. So I'm thinking about running a session of that. We are doing games on demand this year, so I might just do it as part of that, which is very much an indie type of game situation. What about you? Do you have any games that you're thinking about putting on the schedule or any events that you're looking forward to for AcadeCon?
So the games I plan on running are, I definitely want to run some more Legends of the Five Rings. I got to run that last year, and I've got to run a few one-shots since then. And so I don't have a whole lot of opportunities to run it, and I love the new edition. So I will definitely be running L5R, 5th edition. And then I also will be running Nibiru. So the game that I kind of talked about with Federico Sons, that should be, the Kickstarter should be fulfilling sometime in August. So I'm a massive fan of that game. It's science fiction, and I love science fiction. And the game is doing some really, really cool stuff that I think would play well to the audience that we have that comes to AcadeCon. So
If I have a request, I would like for you to run Captain Sonar because I did not get to play that at our faculty retreat.
That is a very, very good suggestion. I didn't even think about. I will be putting up a game of Captain Sonar for 8 people. I will be captain of one ship, and then it is up to somebody else to be the captain of the other, and we will go at it. I love Captain Sonar, but you need 8 people. So
yeah, I may maybe make that because we have a private room set up. That might be a private room game, just because it can get very loud and it's hard to hear. If you can't hear, that makes it harder.
Yes, there's a lot of yelling about diving and torpedoes, and so it's a good time.
Yeah, it was one of the big misses for me at our faculty retreat this year. I really wanted to play that, and it just didn't happen.
Oh, I was so bad. I'm so bad at it too, but I just enjoy it so much because I put on this really thick Sean Connery accent, and I just start going
dive.
And so anyway, it's good time.
Excellent.
And then as far as some stuff that I really want to do is one of the things I love playing games with Craig Campbell. So he's just a really good game master, and so he's funny, and it's just one of the highlights. I just like playing games with him. So it's just one of the things I like to do.
Cool. That's a good, it's a good plan to have. So hopefully anybody who might be listening, if you weren't already planning on coming to AcadeCon, please consider it. I know we harp on it a lot. It is our thing. We're obviously very passionate about it. We started our own convention, and we're through blood, sweat, and tears trying to keep it alive and going. And this year, to be frankly, this is a watershed year for us. That if our event does not at least break even, there is a chance this might be the last one, or at least the last one in this method and like this size and at that location. Because I never was worried about making money. I mean, I wouldn't complain, but it was never my goal. My goal was just not to lose money. And unfortunately, last year that happened, and we lost a significant amount of money that made it difficult to continue. So this is kind of the year. If we can break even, great, we'll keep doing it. If we lose money again, then there's a really good chance we're going to have to change some things that might limit its size, limit its scope, or other fundamental changes. So just come out and play games, have fun. That's your job. My job is to make sure enough people do that we can break even.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to keep doing it. It's just fun.
It is a lot of stress, but I have fun once I get there. Like leading up to it, I'm like every year, like, why am I doing this? This is so dumb. But once the event actually starts happening, it's so much fun. I enjoy it. But yeah, I need to at least break even to justify continuing to do it. I think we will. We've retooled the budget. There's some money we spent last year we didn't need to spend. We thought we were
Yeah.
going to grow, but we didn't. So the budget this year is based off of flat, not growth. So there's a really good chance we're going to break even. There's a good chance we may even make a little bit of money,
Yeah.
which would be great. But we have to. Like, again, if we, like, I'm not going to cry if we don't, but means we're going to make some changes if we. So, anyway, anything else that you would like to say before we wrap things up today?
Uh, no, not really. I like I said, I'm absolutely thankful for everybody who helped out with the AcadeConLine, panelists, the players, and the GMs. I we literally can't do it without you. People say that, but it's true. So
Yeah, it is in fact literally true.
it is literally true. So yeah, no, I had a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to putting these panels out on the podcast feed and then putting them up on YouTube. They are currently, you can watch the video on demands on Twitch, but if you want to wait for like an edited version where we basically cut out the beginning and all the some other stuff, some dead spots, then yeah, they'll be up on YouTube and the podcast feed.
Excellent. So in the meantime, where can people find more of your stuff on the internet?
You can find me at BezCarTom on Twitter, where I talk about all sorts of gaming stuff and all sorts of comic book stuff. And then also you can find me at my blog where I've been posting more stuff. So sparkybar.wordpress.com. So doing more layout work for RPGs.
Yeah, all the panel templates that were beautiful were all from Tom this year.
Yeah. So
it made us look like we actually knew what we were doing. Of course.
Yeah, I try.
Yeah. We need all the help we can get. And again, for myself, Michael at the RPG Academy, everywhere you search the RPG Academy should be me. And please check out AcadeCon. That's AcadeCon.com, or you can go to tabletop.events/AcadeCon-2019.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Well, Shedzar just jumped in. That they're back. They haven't been one of these in a long time. It has been a while. I recognize your name, but it's been quite a while. We've had 4 of them in the last like 36 hours, 5 actually.
Yeah.
And we're back to doing them Tom does a weekly or bi-weekly D&D 5e game.
Yes, and we're currently on a break right now. So Shadzar, if you want it this Wednesday, we are going to be playing in our kind of lull until we start Ghost of Saltmarsh. We're going to be playing some one-shots with our crew, and first game is going to be Lasers and Feelings. So, and then we're going to let Jake. Jake is one of the players. He is a absolutely fantastic dungeon master. He's so good. He's so funny, and he's going to be running it. So I get to play. So super excited for that this Wednesday at 9 p.m.
And then on the alternate Wednesdays, we are doing our Detention Show, which is our live talk show where we talk about DMing stuff, RPGs, silly stuff. Just, it's a good kind of fun. But unfortunately, we are getting ready to sign off here. So
so we'll see you.
So we'll see you when we see you. All right. Awkward wave out.
Yes. Bye-bye.